Hello, Potomac Crossing Ward. This is the lesson for Come Follow Me, Book of Mormon 2020. It's lesson number 41, which covers 3rd Nephi 27 through 4th Nephi. Just going to plow through the material and discuss a little bit of stuff about the chapters in general. So 3rd Nephi 27, in this chapter, Jesus emphasized deed over word when the question of what the official name of the church should be. So the disciples who are fasting and praying, they get together and they're like, hey, we need to know what the official name of the church is. And then Jesus says, hey, he appears to them and he's like, hey, what's up, guys? And they're like, well, the people want to know what the official name of the church is. And then he answers the question. He says, hey, it needs to be in my name. The church needs to be in my name. And then he gets into this lengthy discussion about people actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. So Jesus takes this opportunity to kind of set aside this kind of, it's almost sort of petty. I mean, he answers the question, but he answers it rather matter-of-factly, and then he spends much more time talking about the importance of actually doing what Christ taught. So clearly he's emphasizing the importance of deeds over words. And that's what he spends the majority of the chapter doing. And then in chapter 28, following on the theme of chapter 27, after he finds out what the people of the church wanted, Jesus now finds out what the 12 disciples want. And 9 of the 12 say, after it's our time, we want to come speedily to the kingdom. The other 3 don't want to say what they're thinking. And then Jesus says, well, I know what you're thinking, and what you want to do is actually a good thing. And they want to tarry or continue to live, and bring people to to the gospel, and help keep the church going. And Jesus praises them for that. And a lot of the time when we kind of read this as this sort of like strangely supernatural thing, and we get, it's like we get caught up in this like superhero sort of stuff. And if you look at the text, the text is much more interested in the motivation of these 3 and their role of what they're going to be doing. The whole purpose for their mission or their existence or their new calling as these 3 Nephites who will never die is to bring people to Christ and to help the church be established and help bring natural Israel back when it's during the times of the Gentiles. So the interest there we should be more focused on the mission, what they're trying to accomplish, as opposed to this kind of like weird kind of like supernatural part. I mean, the thing is Mormon kind of asks questions about it and writes about it too, which kind of like feeds into our strange interest in what these guys are like. But in any case, their real mission is to bring natural Israel back into the fold. Okay, and then general comments on chapter 29 and 30. These 2 chapters largely repeat the message of chapter 21. However, in chapter 21, Jesus' target audience was natural Israel, and the message is largely one of encouragement and redemption. Here, Mormon's message is one of warning and woe to the Gentiles. Mormon expands on the theme of 28, 27 through 35, where the 3 disciples will perform a great and marvelous work among the Gentiles. If the Gentiles reject the great and marvelous work and continue to rebel against the Lord, then they'll be punished when Israel is redeemed. So instead of it being about natural Israel and the gathering, this is a warning to the Gentile nations that if we don't accept, we'll be wrecked, and we have no recourse because we're not natural Israel. So that's kind of what that's about. It's a word of warning, so it's a slightly different pitch. Okay, so 4th Nephi. The text of this book traces 200 years of righteousness, followed by 200 years of decline. Mormon's account is a simplified history, tracing a long, drawn-out version of the apostasy cycle seen many times in the earlier history of the Book of Mormon, typically taking only a few years or perhaps a short generation or two. Now, in the scriptures, you have two like there's a timekeeping method of a generation, and there's two lengths of times when it comes to a generation. There's the short generation, which is about 20 years, and that generation is about the natural, the reproductive lifespan, where typically by the time a human becomes an adult around the age of 20, then they become reproductively capable and they start having children. And then the long generation is looking at the average length or the long length of a human lifespan. So that's about 100 years. So there's two different ways. There's two different metrics for a generation. So there's the short generation, or about 20 years. Then there's the long generation, about 100 years. Okay, so the apostasy cycle typically takes only a few years, perhaps a short generation or two. While this account, or the account of 4th Nephi, tracks the same downward spiral, it takes much longer owing to the extraordinary events of 3rd Nephi. So with 3rd Nephi, you have this, the purging of the wicked, this horrific destruction. The more righteous are left over, and then those more righteous people get to spend time with Christ himself, the resurrected Christ. And then they have this, this incredible experience where he's teaching them, and then the Spirit attends them, and then they're all like sanctified. And then the result is you have about 200 years of righteousness, that's pretty good. If we're looking at an apostasy cycle, 200 years of righteousness that's pretty good. While this account tracks the same downward spiral, it takes much longer owing to the extraordinary events of 3rd Nephi. Mormon's intent is to track the long generations in fulfillment of 3rd Nephi 27, 30, 32, and 3rd Nephi 28, 23. The Lehite population does well until the end of the second long generation, and is ripe for annihilation by the end of the 4th long generation, as predicted by Jesus. Mormon's account is highly selective from a historical point of view, omitting a lot of detail to focus on the theological message, which is the decline of the Lehites leading up to their final destruction. Mormon chronicles the events leading up to his time, explaining why things are so dire in his time. Their moral and spiritual failures of the last 200 years have doomed their civilization. Mormon must see the outcome as inevitable, given Jesus' prediction, but at the same time, Mormon struggles to get his people to repent, and he helps them militarily. Mormon hasn't completely given up hope, recognizing the importance of preserving himself and others in the face of adversity, so that righteous individuals can save their own soul. So he knows that there's still value in individuals who are willing to repent and willing to do the right thing, even when your culture's in the complete slide. And we see that in Mormon 9:6. Okay, and that there is one comment I did want to make in 4th Nephi. In verse 10, 4th Nephi 1:10, there's this phrase, fair and delightsome. Now, in our modern English, when we would read something like this, we would think that this sounds like the Nephites were physically attractive. But you think of fair and fair and delightsome. It sounds like you're talking superficially about the way they look. That's not the case at all. So he's talking about the Nephites being a morally and ethically upright people whose society had turned to benefit all, and therefore they were blessed of the Lord. A modern translation like good and gratifying instead of fair and delightsome would better convey the intended meaning. In the Old Testament, the term fair is from the Hebrew tob or tov, which is translated to good 361 times and only translated to fair 7 times. The context is most often in the sense of something being high quality, as opposed to pretty or handsome. For example, when the days of creation are pronounced good in Hebrew, the term in Hebrew there is tob. The term delightsome appears only once in the Old Testament in Malachi 3:12. It is translated from the Hebrew word chafetz, which is elsewhere translated to pleasure and desire. Isaiah uses the term repeatedly in the sense, uses the Hebrew term chafetz repeatedly in the sense of the Lord doing what he needs to get done and being pleased with the outcome. And we see that in Isaiah 44:28 and Isaiah 53:10. So fair and delightsome is not talking about their appearance at all. It's talking about how they are good, solid people who please the Lord with what they're doing. That's what that means. So this isn't talking about appearance at all. Okay, and that wraps it up for this lesson.